Sarah Mitchell stood on the edge of her balcony that rainy night, clutching a USB drive that held the power to destroy everything. 10 years of her life reduced to digital files. 10 years of sacrifice, love, and betrayal. But to understand how she got here, we need to go back 48 hours. Rebecca Hart delivered news that would shatter Sarah's world in a matter of minutes. NexGen Solutions, the company Sarah had poured her life into, was going public. But according to the legal documents, Sarah Mitchell didn't exist. Not as a founder, not as an investor, not even as a footnote. $2.5 million, her entire inheritance from her late mother, gone. Legally signed away as a personal loan guarantee, not an investment. And there was more. Rebecca showed her photos. David, her husband of 10 years, wrapped in the arms of Emma Barnes, his so-called business partner. 3 years they'd been together. They were planning to marry after the IPO. Sarah sat in the parking lot, hyperventilating. She dialed her phone with shaking hands. David's voice was full of excitement when he answered. The IPO had been approved. They were about to be worth $120 million. But when Sarah mentioned Rebecca Hart's name, the line went silent. And then, everything changed. The man Sarah loved, the man she'd worked 3 jobs to support through school, the man who'd cried in her arms when he failed his exams, was gone. In his place was someone she didn't recognize, someone who spoke of gratitude and fairness while offering her $50,000. $50,000 from her $2.5 million. David explained it with the detached logic of a businessman. She had funded the company, yes, but he had built it. There was a difference, he said, and legally his lawyers had made sure everything was proper. Sarah screamed and pounded the steering wheel as the call ended.
Sarah should have seen it coming, but love makes us blind to the truth, even when it's staring us in the face. She remembered the David from 2014, broke, struggling, full of dreams but short on execution. He'd failed his certification exam for the 3rd time. Sarah had just picked up extra shifts at her 2nd job to cover their rent. When he told her he didn't deserve her, she believed he meant it. She wrapped her arms around him and promised they were a team. He kissed her hand with tears in his eyes. What Sarah didn't know then was that David had already learned the most important lesson of his life. People like Sarah, people who loved unconditionally, were the most valuable resource in the world, and resources were meant to be exploited. Jennifer had never liked David. She'd seen through his charm years ago, but Sarah had been too in love to listen. Now, sitting in her sister's living room, Sarah finally understood. Jennifer asked the question that would change everything. What was Sarah going to do about it? Sarah had no legal claim, no lawyers, no money, but Jennifer reminded her of something important. Sarah had been there for everything. The offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the tax evasion schemes, the $500,000 bribe to Senator Collins that secured the government contract. Sarah knew where all the bodies were buried, and if she exposed David, the company would collapse. She'd get nothing, but neither would he. Sometimes, when you can't win, the next best thing is making sure your enemy loses. Sarah's access card still worked. David's arrogance had left that door open. She was downloading years of incriminating evidence when Emma Barnes walked in, the woman who'd stolen her husband, the woman who was about to marry into Sarah's fortune. They stood there, staring at each other, 2 women caught in the same man's web. Emma claimed she didn't know about Sarah at first.
David had told her they were separated, only together on paper for the business. It was the same lie he'd probably told a dozen women before her. Sarah could see it in Emma's face, the moment reality crashed through the fantasy. Emma had thought she was special. She was just the latest in a long line of useful people. Sarah showed Emma the truth. Senator Collins's bribe, the offshore accounts, years of fraud and tax evasion. Emma sank into a chair, stunned. The company she thought was legitimate, the man she thought she loved, it was all built on lies. And then Emma said something unexpected. She asked Sarah what she wanted. Emma had signed a prenup. David had told her it was standard. But what if Emma didn't marry him? What if someone else had a legal claim before the IPO? Emma wasn't offering out of kindness. She was offering because she just realized she was in love with a criminal. And sometimes, even thieves have a conscience. Sarah stepped away to call her sister, expecting an update. What she got was a revelation that turned betrayal into something far darker. Michael Porter, David's first business partner, died in a car accident in 2016. Jennifer had found Michael's sister, and she'd been investigating the death for years. 1 month before the accident, David had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on Michael. Michael's sister believed it wasn't an accident. She just couldn't prove it. Until now. Sarah had married a thief. She was divorcing a fraud, but she might have been sleeping next to a murderer. David had come back to the office for something he'd forgotten. Instead, he found his past and present colliding in the worst possible way. He demanded to know what Sarah was doing. She told him the truth. She was taking what belonged to her, evidence of their crimes, because she'd been there for all of it. David told her to leave before he called security, so Sarah called his bluff.
She mentioned Senator Collins, the offshore accounts, and then she mentioned Michael, the life insurance policy, 1 month before the accident. Emma asked the question Sarah was afraid to ask. Did you kill your partner? And David, in a moment of rage-fueled honesty, confessed. It was an accident, he claimed. Michael was going to expose the Senator Collins deal. He was going to destroy everything they'd built. David had to stop him. The room fell silent. David's eyes darted between the two women, and then he saw it. Sarah's phone on the desk, recording. David Mitchell had just confessed to murder, and Sarah had it all on tape. What happened next happened fast. David lunged for the phone. Sarah grabbed it first. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it with enough force to leave bruises. Emma tried to pull him off, and he shoved her into the desk. Sarah ran. David caught her in the hallway, slammed her against the wall. His hands went for her throat. This was the man she'd loved, the man she'd sacrificed everything for, and he was trying to kill her. Sarah kneed him in the groin, and when he doubled over, she ran for the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, David mouthed 3 words, "I'll destroy you." But Sarah had news for him. He was already destroyed. He just didn't know it yet. And that's how Sarah ended up on that balcony, rain pouring down, holding a USB drive that contained David's entire criminal empire. Detective Anderson called to confirm they had the recording, David's confession, the files Sarah had downloaded. It was more than enough for fraud, tax evasion, and to reopen the investigation into Michael Porter's death. The IPO was canceled. David's assets would be frozen during the investigation. Sarah asked what would happen to the company. It would be dissolved, the detective said. Sarah had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes.
She dropped the USB drive over the balcony. She didn't need it anymore. The police had everything they needed, and Sarah needed to let go of the evidence, of the anger, of the last 10 years of her life. 6 months later, David Mitchell was sentenced to 25 years for fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Sarah sat in the gallery, watching the man she'd loved be led away in handcuffs. She felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, just emptiness. Sarah and Emma met for coffee a week after the sentencing. It was strange, sitting across from the woman who'd slept with her husband, but Emma had testified against David. She'd chosen the truth over love. That counted for something. Emma told her the prosecutor said Sarah could have gotten millions from the asset seizure if she'd cooperated earlier. Sarah already knew. She could have taken a settlement, could have stayed quiet, could have walked away with enough money to start over. But she didn't, because it was never about the money. It was about David knowing he didn't win. Emma apologized for her part in it. Sarah apologized too, for what she'd become at the end. When she was standing on that balcony, she told Emma she understood David, the rage, the need to destroy what you can't have. They'd both been David's victims, but Sarah had almost become him. That was the part that scared her most. A year later, Sarah was teaching financial literacy to young women, helping them protect themselves legally, financially, emotionally, teaching them the lessons she'd learned the hard way. A young woman asked if marriage wasn't supposed to be about trust. Sarah told her that marriage should be about partnership. Trust, yes, but also respect. And respect means ensuring both people are protected and valued on paper, not just in words. She glanced at a photo on her desk, young her and David,
happy and naive. She told her students to learn from her mistakes so they'd never have to make them themselves.
Sarah received $275,000 from the Asset Seizure Fund, 11% of her original investment. David Mitchell is serving 25 years for fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. Emma Barnes returned to corporate consulting and never married. NexGen Solutions was dissolved. 150 employees lost their jobs. Michael Porter's family received $2.8 million in the settlement of their wrongful death lawsuit. Some people say Sarah got justice. Others say she got revenge. Sarah says she got something more important. She got free. And sometimes freedom is the only victory that matters.